welcome family. I hope everyone's had a wonderful day. It's a pleasure for me to be here with everyone, just to have a few moments just to go through a deeper understanding of the science of sexual alchemy, what we're going to go through. So we will have Kristos in a moment, starting up with homeostasis in the nervous system and giving us an overview of the different endocrine glands, connecting it to the nervous system and going all the way into, let's say, the lower dantian or into the lower three portions. Because you know, when you're looking at it from a yoga point of view or these energy centers, then when we get to the lower tree, then we kind of look at it as if this is lower nature, the lower aspects of us, in the sense that most of us, or a large majority of us, are ruled from not up here. We're ruled from down below, many men. A lot of our sexual drive is the thing that drives us in this reality here. So it's the cultivation of this space. So Kristos will just go through this homeostasis, again, looking at the different hormones that are involved in this and the balancing of this. After this, Sekhemtat, which we're very fortunate today to have, is going to go through the sexual alchemy, which is involving the female side of things. So she'll be going through menstrual cycles and menstrual pain, also menopause, and how this emotionally affects women, the different organs that are involved in this, the practices that are involved, the way in which we go through mentally and the exercise we do physically to actually, for a woman to actually have more vitality, less bleeding, and a better life in the long run. So Sekhemtat will go through that. And then afterwards, I'll go through sexual alchemy, which is generally the whole thing, let's say. So then I'll incorporate homeostasis and the female aspect. Then I'll actually talk a little bit more about the male side, as we're fortunate that Sekhemtat will be going through. Okay, so it's a funny old thing. As a man, talking about the female side of things, yeah. So when a woman does it, it's good, because then she has personal experience, even though the science is the same. It's not like the science is any different science. So I'll be talking a little bit about the female side of things as well. The exercise, or let's say we do one exercise today, if we get a chance, where for the women, and we're just going to talk very briefly on the men's side of things. Yeah, so I think that is what we've got in store for today. Just the three of us are going to go through this connection, homeostasis, nervous system, endocrine gland, and how this connects to the female and the male reproductive system. We're ready to begin our presentation. So you know, we're just going to go into, because we're still really at the moment in the science of Jing. We haven't left out of Jing yet. I got into like Qi Gong, really, or Shen Gong, but still, because homeostasis itself just falls into this category, the whole body mechanism. So Kristos is going to open our awareness to this and connect it all to the energy as well of Qigong. All right, Kristos. You're ready, sir, to unmic yourself?
Gosh.
I know you thinking that he was. Yeah?
Yeah. Welcome, everyone. Yeah. Do make sure you comment in the chat if there's any questions or queries. You know, we like to know that everyone's awake and listening to us, and that we're not going too fast or too slow. So what I'm going to do, let me share. Okay, so share. Yeah, so the aim of today is just giving everyone an understanding of homeostasis and also how our body achieves homeostasis. So when we're looking at homeostasis, there's two main ways or two main systems that the body actually uses. And we're definitely going to go through that today, yeah? So when we're looking at homeostasis in itself, homeostasis is basically how the body maintains good health. Yeah, so it comes from the two words. So homeos meaning similar, and stasis meaning standing still. So when you look at the interpretation, it basically relates to basically things staying the same. Yeah, and when you're looking at, for example, who's ever been to hospital and the doctors are checking your bloods, for example, the reason why the doctor wants to check your blood is they want to see that everything is in balance. So even if, let's say, the white blood cell count or the platelet count is slightly high, or when they're checking your blood glucose level and everything's, it might be a little bit too low or a little bit high, it doesn't take much of a shift for there to be, a problem. So the body always has to constantly check itself, self-regulate itself, have an understanding of what's going on, so it's able to react any problems. Yeah. So the nervous system and the endocrine system, both of these are systems that help to maintain a homeostasis within the body. Yeah. So if there's anything you learn from today, it's that the body is trying to always achieve a state of balance. Yeah. When we're looking at spirituality, etc., we're always looking at the balance, yeah, the yin and the yang. So the body achieves it through what we call homeostasis. Okay. So when we're looking at homeostasis, we're looking at two systems. So we're going to be looking at the nervous system, and then we're also going to be looking at the endocrine system. Yeah. So when we're looking at the nervous system, if you can see my cursor, we're looking at the central nervous system. And with the central nervous system, we are looking at the brain, the cerebellum, the brainstem, the cerebrum, and the spinal cord. Yeah, this makes up the central nervous system. Now, when we're looking outside, so all of the projections from the spine, you can see these nerves, the yellow nerves coming out from the blue. So these are what we call our peripheral nervous system. Yeah. So when we're looking at the peripheral nervous system, the central nervous system deals with our consciousness. It deals with our alertness. It's the brain of our body. So it's, everything's centered around that. And as you get the projections away from that central point, you're dealing with the peripheral nervous system, which is basically an extension of the central nervous system, which helps to provide a sense of feedback or also acts out the will of our central nervous system. Yeah. Again, now the peripheral nervous system, that can be broken down into both the semantic nervous system, and the semantic nervous system is dealing with our feeling, our touch, our voluntary action. So if we want to move our hands, touching a bottle, feeling the bottle, that's where all of that semantic information is being transferred to us. So any action that we do and any sensation. So you've got nerves, and they're constantly producing action and constantly feeding back to us. You also got the autonomic nervous system, which is not so voluntary, and it just acts on a subconscious level. So we don't have to think about these things, such as breathing, digestion. All of these things are taking place at the autonomic nervous system. And when we're looking at homeostasis, homeostasis is also functioning within the autonomic nervous system. Yeah. Do we have any questions at this point, Sekhemtat? Or if you have any questions right now before we go into more detail, please do ask. Otherwise, I'll assume that everyone is understanding what is going on. Sometimes it can be, it is a bit of a topic to digest, but when you do understand the key features of it, it really, really becomes important, and you can prevent a lot of problems just by internally listening to yourself, your body, how it's feeling, and certain symptoms that we go through. So, okay, so when we're looking at the endocrine system, we're looking at 4 major glands within the endocrine system. Some texts will say there's a little bit more, some texts will say there's a little bit less. And the reason why, when we're looking at the endocrine system, although we have major glands, anything that deals with the production of hormones, etc., it can be considered a gland if it meets all the features. So, like, for example, if we look here, we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we've got the 8. So for men with testicles and female with the ovaries. However, some texts will break it down, the thyroid and the parathyroid, as 2 separate glands, because they do different things, but they're in the same location, and they work with each other. So the endocrine system contains 8 major glands, and I'm going to talk about the difference now between the nervous system and the endocrine system. So again, when we're talking about the nervous system, we're really only talking about the autonomic nervous system, or if it's easier for you to remember, you can call it the automatic nervous system, if it's easier for your brain to digest, yeah? And especially when we're going through this. So just to remind you, and this is, it is a key feature, that when we're looking at the 8, or according to this one will not include the hypothalamus in relationship to the endocrine glands. So this notes 7 of them, and it excludes the hypothalamus. And I believe the reason for that is the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland are working very closely with each other. That, you could argue that they're one and the same thing, even though they're not. So again, when we're looking at the chakra system, we're looking at the pineal gland being that kind of, that, I wouldn't say master gland, but I would say the pineal gland kind of being where the crown chakra would be. And the reason for that is it is dealing with rhythm. And not only is it dealing with rhythm in terms of spirituality and it being associated with that, it is one of the glands that is dealing with our sleep-wake cycle through the release of melatonin. And it's only in, when we're sleeping, that's when we're closer to our spirit and our spiritual nature, and also the messages that our spirit is trying to convey to us. Yeah. So when you look at all of these glands and in correspondence to the chakra, you can see how it makes sense and how they can correlate to each other. And throughout the slide, we'll be touching on that. So when we're looking at the hypothalamus now, so the hypothalamus is this region here, so you can see it, so very much so in the middle of the brain. And the hypothalamus is important for maintaining that homeostasis. So for everyone who might have a smart meter, although I probably don't recommend it, it's basically like the smart meter within our body, because it's always detecting and always getting an understanding of the different levels of different components within our body. Things like blood pressure, hunger, temperature, thirst, all of these things, the hypothalamus is reacting and messaging other endocrine glands to do their job. So, for example, when you're looking at the hypothalamus is the communication between the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, and it was also linked with our endocrine system. Yeah. So when we're looking at, for example, the hypothalamus, we can see it's situated in the brain. When we're looking at the thalamus as well, which is is just referring to it being below the thalamus. But when we're looking at the thalamus, you're getting a lot of neurological connections. Again, with the hypothalamus, in that area, in that region, it is filled with different neurological connections. But at the same time of being a place of neurological connections, it is also a place where you can see it's so closely related to the pituitary gland. And any changes and any feedback here, the hypothalamus will send hormones directly to the pituitary gland, which is known as the master gland. And then that gland will send impulses, that gland will send hormones to other glands within our body. So the pituitary gland, to break it down, is basically what they call the master gland, because if we go into the next slide, just here, when we're looking at the pituitary gland, it is a gland which sends hormones to other glands, which tells the other glands, such as the adrenals, to send hormones within the bloodstream. So basically, it's instructing other endocrine glands within the body. And the role of the hypothalamus, that role is basically to kind of instruct the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus is there to instruct the pituitary gland on, what to do. Yeah. So if you think of it as a constant communication, the hypothalamus is detecting, the changes within the body, and the hypothalamus is basically saying to the pituitary gland, "Oh, I don't like this. There's a lack of these hormones, or this part of the body is not doing its job properly. I need you to send messages to that part or to the other worker glands to get the job done." And that's basically what the pituitary gland would do. Right, so I hope that makes sense. Oh, got a little bit of a dry cough and no water around. Actually, is there any questions at this point? Because it's not a straightforward topic. And I'm just wondering if there's any questions, because I don't want to lose anyone anywhere.
Yeah, it's not straightforward at all. But the repetition of going through and explaining this science does allow for deeper clarity each time. It's like each time you hear the topic or go through, because we're connecting it all. And sometimes we're just so aware of the independent activity of these different organs, not appreciating, how I like to say it, we like liquid light beings. Yeah. So the glands. All right. So yeah, man, I think you're good, Kristos.
All right. So let me go into the difference now between the endocrine system and the nervous system in regards to sending messages. So if we look at messages in general, the cells, the body has different ways it will send messages. So, for example, cell to cell, it can transmit messages through what we call gap junctions. So these are gaps within the cell membranes. It can also send messages or release hormones and that's through the extracellular fluid. Also, through other ways, such as through the bloodstream and hormones, and also synaptic connections. Yeah? So, let's see here. So, okay. So when,
You know, Kristos.
I don't know what's happening to me today.
Yeah, I get a little bit of water and just soften up your throat for a second.
All right.
Give your throat a little massage there. That intracellular fluid is so important for men. That communication that you're referring to there, because all that, I think, is something like 30% of male semen is cerebral spinal fluid. So this whole extracellular fluids and its communication, again, this is why we're trying to connect it all together, because that is something, that's why I think they would say sometimes we have mental, or men will have, like, when you ejaculate, when I was younger, they would say when you ejaculate, you're killing brain cells. This is what I used to hear growing up. And I think it's a similar kind of thing going on. But I think it's because of what Kristos is going to go into now, how we have this extracellular fluid as well as cerebral spinal fluid within the semen itself. And it does take up a large part of it, as well as we've got the other nutrients in there, like the zinc, which is really important again for all this whole process. So that whole releasing or ejaculating will definitely have effect on how which the brain will communicate or relay messages to each other.
Okay, welcome everyone. So we're gonna speak briefly on Qigong, or women experiencing Qigong. I'm definitely going to speak on the menstruation cycle. This is not moving. Sorry, I'm having an issue moving this. Okay, there we go. Okay, so our menstrual cycle is regulated by 3 organs, which is the spleen, the liver, and the kidney. And the funny thing about all these organs is they all clean and filter the blood. And so we're gonna go into the spleen. So the spleen is what carries and helps to circulate fluid throughout the body, as well as I mentioned earlier, that it filters the blood and it helps to remove any odd or damaged red blood cells away from certain areas. And it also stores iron in the form of ferritin. And ferritin is a protein. So when the body requires more iron, it would release or transform ferritin into iron. So our body has the ability to store nutrients or minerals for when it requires it. And the spleen is what creates or also carries the chi, or the energy, or the life force essence. And the spleen can be weakened by a variety of things: poor eating habits, consumption of too much meat, junk food, or alcohol, drugs, which can really have an effect on the spleen. Worry, doubt, and not trusting yourself, or lacking self-value or self-worth, I think is quite important when speaking on the Qigong, because worry, self-doubt, it affects our ability to communicate. It creates a blockage within the system. And it also inhibits the way our organs function because of the restrictions. And because the spleen, where the spleen lies, the next organ to that is the stomach, it have an effect onto the stomach. So it can create a restriction or a tightening within the stomach itself that can lead to nausea or additional health issues. So it's very important with Qigong. The focus is the breathing, or Dantian breathing, so breathing from your lower stomach. And this helps calm the system. It helps to circulate blood flow. And as we know that Qi is in the blood, moving or circulating the blood throughout the body. We're moving energy. So it's not blocked or locked in one area. So it's quite important to focus on what it is that is creating blockages within our body, or the way in which we view ourselves, as well as the thoughts that we carry on a daily basis. As we know, sometimes the stressful life within the society, we have stress of work. The environment within itself is polluted, and then that can also create an effect on the spleen, simply because we're not taking in as much negative ions, and the negative ions within our body are necessary for circulation. And the weakening of the spleen can lead to, as I mentioned earlier, poor blood circulation, damaged red blood cells, and less iron within the body. So if the spleen is affected, it will have issues storing iron within itself, as well as filtering and cleaning the blood, which can lead to additional issues like infections. And this can lead to a breakdown within the uterine lining of women, which leads to irregular cycle, weakness, or fatigue. As we know, as women, some of us may experience premenstrual cramps. So we have cramps before tenderness of the breast. Some women get headaches, some women get tiredness before your cycle. And this is a demonstration that this organ isn't fully functioning, because we need the spleen in order to get our reproductive system to function optimally. And another thing that is experienced is moodiness or irregularities in our mood. So a lot of people say, oh, she's annoyed, that means she's on her period. Oh, okay, she's behaving this way, that means she's on her cycle. And though we may see these things as normal, or, oh, it's something that just happens, what our body is showing us is the irregularities or the dysfunction that is happening within us. And so we take our discomfort and we label them as normal. So when we experience it, we don't hone in onto why it is that we're experiencing and responding to situations the way we are doing. So with this, the weakening of the spleen and the breaking down of the uterine lining, it helps to restrict the flow of chi, or the life force essence, because we know our reproductive organs or a sexual energy is similar to chi. And so it can create blockages that could limit its flow. And then moving on to the liver, as I mentioned earlier, it does work in conjunction with the spleen, as similarly it moves the blood around the body, or the life force energy around the body, as well as it filters and cleans the blood. It promotes digestion and absorption, again dealing with iron. If we're having issue with absorbing nutrients within the body, it can lead to periods. So a lack of iron, as mentioned, and as I should say, a lack of vitamin C can also prevent the absorption of iron. So if we aren't absorbing the iron that our body is taking in, then we are more likely to pass it. And then this can lead to, as I mentioned before, painful periods, as well as other hormonal issues, like why are you getting spots on your body? Maybe your liver isn't functioning properly in cleaning the blood. Why are you getting rashes? Stuff like eczema. What is really happening within the blood or within the body that is creating the outbreaks on our skin? And so the liver can be weakened by our emotion, which is anger and frustration. So anger, I would say, an emotion that is to be expressed. But the difference begins where you express this anger and then internalize it. So you hold on to whatever it is that created the issue, and you hone in on it day in, day out, and it locked into the liver. And suppression of this and the frustration of this can lead to people taking drugs and alcohol, which further damages the liver, which also leads to depression. And it's interesting that those who consume excessive alcohol or drugs are those who have severe anger or frustration issues. they tend to experience depression. And the next organ above would be the lungs, which deals with depression. And with depression, it inhibits your ability to breathe appropriately. So you do a lot of upper breathing from the upper part of the lungs as opposed to the mid or the lower aspect, which is the largest part of the lungs. As we mentioned, it's the Dantian breathing from the lower belly. So it's like a cycle that happens continuously. Once one organ is malfunctioning, then the next organ is more likely to malfunction, and it leads to another organ and another organ. And so we have an array or variety of discomforts or illnesses or pains within our body that we begin to experience. And we're quite unsure why. We don't know why we're getting continuous headaches. We're not sure why we're getting pain in our pelvis. We're unsure why we're having referred pain. And it's simply stemming from blockages within the body. The body's inability to properly function because energy of the blood isn't moving, as well as the quality of the blood. And the weakening of the liver can lead to, as I mentioned, stagnant energy or blockages. And in order to unlock that, you have to go within yourself in finding out what that emotional issues that you're holding on to. It may stem from something that happened last week. It may stem from something that happened 10 years ago, or something that happens when you were a child. So we hold on to the traumas, and we hold on to the experiences that we have within life, and we forget to release or practice qigong or meditation or yoga as a way to release this discomfort and let go and allow the energy to flow. So as I mentioned, stagnant qi leads to stagnant blood, and it also leads to stagnant emotions. So you have the same repetitive thoughts. You're a cycle of you wake up, you're frustrated, you're exhausted, you're tired, you have negative thoughts, you go to sleep, you wake up, and then you have the same thing happening over again. The cycle that happens within the mind and the cycle that happens within the organs, they're going through the same discomfort over and over and over again. And over time, it starts to break down and become weak, and that leads to additional issues within the future. So the signs are a way to recognize that you're experiencing some discomfort within your liver or any of the surrounding organs is aching pain within the body, premenstrual cramps, as I mentioned before, lower back pain or stomach pains. And this is something that happens a lot throughout our cycle as well. We get some lower back pains that may lead into pain in the pelvis, that may lead to pain down the legs, that also leads to temporal pain, skin rashes, bumps. So these are the things we are to hone in on or focus on when throughout our daily life in order to combat or transfer our experience to be more of a positive experience. As we know, pain or discomfort in life is inevitable, but it's the type of pain and the transformation of said pain that decides whether or not we live a life of pain that leads to growth, or pain that leads to illness and sickness. There's also menstrual discomfort from the malfunction of the liver, which is sharp stabbing pains, excessive bleeding, and blood clots. So the blood clots comes from stagnant blood within the liver. So if the liver doesn't have the ability or is not allowing blood to pass, then as women, we end up creating a lot more blood clots, and clots within our menstruation cycle is actually not normal. There's a few women that I know had conversations with, and I remember expressing to them that I'm not too sure why I'm experiencing clots. Is that normal? And they say they have never experienced clots throughout their cycle, which I thought, oh, okay, well, that's weird. Maybe each person to their own. But really, as we understand how the body functions, we realize clotting of the blood is simply a blockage and its inability to truly filter and create a clear path for things to circulate. And the kidney. So the kidney is where the life force energy or Jing is stored. It can be passed on to you from your parents. It can be transformed. It can be gented. it can be used to heal the body. So the kidney removes excessive waste and fluid from the body, similar to the spleen and quite similar to the liver as well. So they work in conjunction with each other. It also stores, creates and moves chi, as I mentioned earlier. And the biggest thing with the kidney is fear that helps to weaken it. So there's quite a lot of experiences that we may have that may create fear. And though fear isn't necessarily a negative experience, it's whether or not we hold on to that fear. So we can choose to go into it, explore it, and then let go of it. Thus, we disperse the energy of fear, allowing the kidney to function, allowing things to move, allowing the energy to be transformed into chi. But when we hold on to that experience and we're afraid to move forward in our life, we're afraid to choose a new job, we are afraid to open up to the people that is around us, we are afraid to go back and study again, whatever it may be, whatever the fear may be surrounding. If we don't let go of this fear, then it can lead to additional issues, as I've mentioned earlier, much more than just menstrual issues, but that's just the focus for today. So your weak willpower also affects the kidneys, as well as insecurity and isolation. And each emotion leads into the other, so they're never isolated. So if you're experiencing anger and frustration, it could be from fear of being misunderstood. It could also lead to depression from not being understood, which can lead to fear of, let me be careful of what I say, let me not express who I am. And so each emotion or each energy leads into another. So it creates, like I mentioned earlier, a cycle that is continuous. And it's learning how to break that cycle through the practice of Qigong and the practice of meditation. The breath is actually quite important in Qigong, as the breath helps to move the energy or to move Qi or blood around the body. So deep breathing in our dantian helps to relax the muscles in those areas. And the tightening of those muscles is actually also what leads to additional issues, what leads to pain. As women, we tend to hold a lot of our emotions and we tend to hold a lot of our traumas within our womb. So that area can become quite tight and quite restricted. And so it is necessary to release or disperse the energy within our womb or within each organs. And we can do so through meditating, doing Qigong, and doing yoga and being mindful, simple as taking a walk in the park, sitting near a waterfall. You know, we don't always have to sit indoors in order to generate this chi or this life energy. So the weakening of the kidney can lead to lower back pain, irregular menstrual cycle, and additional kidney issues. So how are we allowing fear to cripple our daily life, to cripple the choices we make? And in doing so, it creates ties, knots, and a crippling effect in how we see ourselves and the world. And as I mentioned, it's just an endless cycle. And it's quite interesting speaking on the menstruation, because it is the same or it's similar to the sexual energy, or Jing, Qi, the sexual energy, the creative energy. They are one within the same. And I'll just give an example of someone I know who had a cyst growing in their breast, quite large and very noticeable. Though the doctor said it was benign, it created a lot of severe pain and discomfort, inability to sleep because of the pain. And so I gave her a couple of movements, rotations, and breathing that she was supposed to do about 2 or 3 times a day, every day. And within a week, she had expressed pain reduction. She's expressed that the size of the cyst actually lessened. So it's quite powerful Qigong with physical movement linked with our breathing and our intention. So it is our intention to create change that actually allows change to happen. So I'm gonna go into a bit further into the sexual parts of things. So sexual alchemy really deals with the transformation of Jing. It deals with the transformation of the energy we were given at birth into transformation into Shen, or the spiritual energy. So the whole purpose of developing and increasing our sexual energy is not just for pleasure within itself, but it's also for spiritual growth, which is connection with our inner self, our true being, as well as a way to heal our organs. So it was mentioned that we use about 60 to 70% of our energy daily, whether it's to exercise, eat, digestion, go to work. But we replace this loss of energy through sleep. So we wake up, we have another 100%, we go out about our day, and we utilize 60 to 70%, and the cycle continues. However, as women, 30 to 40% of this energy is actually used in creating the necessary hormones for our body to function and for our reproductive organs to function. And also in the creating of the uterine lining in preparation to house an egg for birth, for childbirth. So it's a quite large percentage of our energy is being used for that purpose. And in order to prevent the loss in this energy, because we lose this energy through our menstrual cycle, as I mentioned, the energy is within the blood, or the chi is within the blood. And through our menstrual cycle, the losing of that blood equates to the losing of chi, equates to the losing of our energy. And though this is, they say, is inevitable, our cycle, we can lessen the amounts we lose through Qigong. Yeah, so from my experience with utilizing Qigong, I had quite a heavy cycle, 6 or 7 days. About 4 days of that would be quite heavy. And it would be severe pains, stabbing pains, unable to move, unable to walk, unable to eat because of nausea. As I mentioned, that the 3 organs work harmoniously with each other. And if one is out of sync, it affects not only those 3 organs, but organs within the surrounding area, like the stomach or the lungs. And I started practicing Qigong when I was experiencing some discomfort, and it really lessened and relaxed the tension within my stomach. So my focus throughout the practice of Qigong wasn't on the pain I was experiencing, but it was on my breath and sinking the chi into my lower dantian. So that creates an expansion of my stomach, and that leads to relaxation of the muscle, which reduces the pain and discomfort. And over time, my cycle day has lessened, as well as the flow of my cycle is severely less as experienced, as well as less clots throughout my cycle. Before I move on, do we have any questions or comments that we would like to share about what it is that was mentioned earlier?
There's no questions or nothing like that's come up at the moment, but so far your description is really good. Give a lot of clarity to the different organs and how they affect the reproductive system for women, most definitely. It's a lot of good clarity there. And I truly hope everyone's, is keeping up with it. As we said, if there's truly any other questions, I would just express them to Sekhemtat at the right moment.
Can I make a comment?
Oh, go for it.
Yes.
Yeah, it's Sophia. I just wanted to say that I can really relate to what you were saying about holding anger. I suffered with period pains for about 20 years plus, and it's all making sense now. If I knew what I knew then, I mean, and now I'm like committed to helping people, other women on the journey, anger, not expressing it. I can relate to that and understand it. It was so much like an aha moment when you were speaking. So, you know, it's very. Oh.
I know, very clear
Oh
and
my God.
concise.
Can you still hear me? Oh, can you still hear me? Have I gone? I think the reception went.
Yeah, I think you broke up towards the end, but I can hear you
Oh,
clearly now.
yeah. I'm still here. I don't know what you heard, but I'm still here. Did you hear the bit when I said I think you're amazing?
No, I didn't.
We didn't get that part there, but we got it
That
now,
was the
though.
important bit. Yeah, that's my comment. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All are. Yeah, we all are. That's it. That's all I
so
wanted to share, really.
All right, sis, thank you.
Thank you, sister. It's definitely very important as women to ensure that we aren't holding on to the emotions that we feel. We have to express it, whether we feel anger or sadness. It is good to express that outwardly. And letting go of it, I think, is the most important thing. I can speak for myself to say it's quite hard letting go when someone has hurt you. But it is definitely necessary in order to allow the body to function at its optimum way. Yes, someone says I can share that the cramps we experience are actually contractions. Yes, they are. And those contractions are actually caused by prostaglandins being released in that area. But those contractions does not have to be painful. I know women who absolutely no pain whatsoever, no pain, no discomfort throughout their cycle. Though it's a variety of things that can cause it, as I've mentioned earlier, the way we eat and the food we eat, ensuring that if we're taking in iron, we're consuming vitamin C, because without vitamin C, the body is unable to absorb iron. How are we cleansing the food that we take in? So it's a variety of stuff. Are we exercising? Are we active? Or are we becoming couch potatoes, as they say? You know, so it's a variety of things that can create an uncomfortable experience with our menstruation cycle. Yeah. So the sexual healing energy, as mentioned in the title, healing, is supposed to be used as a way to heal the body from discomfort and pain, and not just our reproductive system. If we have lung issues, any organ issues, or any discomfort that we may experience throughout the journey of being intertwined with your partner in a sexual way, it should lead to the generation of that energy. And in order to enter into this in a way that is going to be a positive experience, is the intentions of both individuals. Where is your mind? Are you experiencing confusion beforehand? Were you annoyed? Are you angry? Do you feel like you don't have much self-worth entering into this activity? And that can translate into what is created within the body. Because if you're entering into something like this that generate energy, you can be tense, which create knots, which create blockages, which create an uncomfortable experience like pain. I remember reading somewhere where a few people were given their experience of pain during intercourse. And pain during intercourse is not something that should be normal. It means that your body is experiencing some discomfort that needs to be looked at And so a few people express going to gynecologists, going to their GP, and being told that, oh, maybe it's just your cycle. Oh, well, maybe it's something you're doing wrong. Or, oh, it's nothing, it's just in your mind. And I think as women, when we experience a lot of pain, especially the magnitude at which we express the discomfort we experience, a lot of the time the feedback can be, it's just in your mind, but we know what our experience is, and we can feel when something within our being is taking a turn for the left. And so it's weakness within the pelvic floor that can create pain during sexual intercourse. And a way to actually lessen that pain is to do exercises, pelvic floor exercises. So I think there's this exercise called the egg exercise, where you insert an egg and you use the muscle of the cervix to pull the egg upwards, to pull it downwards, to pull it towards the left, towards the right. And while you're doing this, you're contracting, or you're holding the one, which is the perineum or your vagina. So you're not getting your anus involved. You're isolating the contraction from your anus and the contraction of the perineum, or the contraction of the vagina. And it's holding that prevents the seeping out of this energy. It allows the energy to build, and it strengthens the muscles within that area as well. As well as during this, excuse me, as well as during this, during this journey, it is important to allow our focus on your breathing. I think I've mentioned breathing about 50 times already, but we know the breath is life, and without breath comes death. And so our focus on our breathing during the process of intercourse is quite important, because it allows the circulation of chi, it allows the movement of the blood, it allows the organs to, it allows the organs to create and generate and build this sexual energy, or to build this chi, or this life force energy. So the breathing really aids in that happening. And more so, the breathing should be from your lower stomach or your lower belly, as opposed to just breathing from the chest. And so the breath throughout this entire process is quite important, because it also creates a harmonious relationship between you and your partner, because they are also focusing on breathing and channeling and creating that chi energy. And it's good to visualize during this process the movement of energy. So as you inhale, you are inhaling the energy and allowing it to travel down to your dantian, almost like there's a cauldron within your lower belly that you're allowing the energy or the chi to flow into, and it builds. And as you exhale, that energy travels around and up the spine and up into the head. You can create a continuous circle, so it allows the energy to build as opposed to escape or to pool inside the head. So you're creating like a cycle. As you inhale, it goes down into the cauldron, it mixes, it generates, and it goes up the spine, and it goes back down again. And this creates a higher form of euphoria, to say the least, as opposed to just the pleasure from the intercourse. You're creating additional pleasure with the generation of this chi, so you aren't losing any energy. You're generating this energy, and you're utilizing that energy within the body to heal the said organs, to heal your womb, to heal your liver, your kidneys, to heal wherever you're having any discomfort. And for a woman, I actually heard that there's a saying that says, if you don't use it, you lose it. And I never thought that I was going to use or see this statement being used towards the woman's clitoris. And it mentioned that if a woman does not utilize the pleasure center, which is her clitoris, then over time it loses its ability to do what it's supposed to do, which is to give pleasure. And so they say no amount of stimulation would rejuvenate that area. But because we know when you don't use a particular area, it becomes stagnant. So it's important to move the energy around in that area. So this is where the contraction of the vagina or the perineum is important. So even though you're not taking part in sexual intercourse, the practicing allows energy to move within that area, so it doesn't stay stagnant. It moves throughout and it creates a healing energy, as I mentioned. So it's important to continuously contract and relax. I think the number I've heard from Sahu is what, 300 contractions a day of the vagina or of the perineum in order to keep it in optimum position. And so for women who have lost or the function of their clitoris has lessened, it can be stimulated through this contraction and through the moving and the visualization of the energy and the chi in that area to heal itself. Because as we know, nothing within the body is dead or can completely lose function. If there is a will, there is a way. And through Qi Gong, we've learned that the energy just needs to move throughout the body. Yeah, it's important for us to, when we are engaging in this, when we are being engaged with our partner, to ensure that our breathing is intact, the contraction of our vagina is intact, as well as the contraction throughout intercourse continuously of our perineum. It lessens pain throughout experience. It's not just going to be pleasure of the clitoris, but it leads to cervical pleasures of the cervix. And we can use this energy we can use this energy that we create during sexual intercourse to store this energy, and it, in the long term, as we age, it lessens the illness or the dis-ease that we experience. It lessens the mental dis-ease that we experience, like dementia, or the name just slipped out my head, but I think dementia is there. So the loss of that would be present. So when we look at the sexual energy, it's not something that is negative, and it's not something that shouldn't be spoken about, because women do not lose chi through sexual intercourse. A woman does not lose chi during ejaculation. It actually builds and increases the chi within that area. So I think I'm going to leave that there. I think I have spoken enough.
Oh yeah, that you sending me, that's the end of your presentation. I'm probably
I
end the thing, huh?
think I have gone over my half an hour there. If there are any questions or any comments.
Well, you are like 5 minutes on time, so that is good, because you know time is like this. But thank you.
Yeah, really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. Yeah, and what's so good, you know, me and Sahu wasn't gonna pretend and explain it from our side of things, you know. We had to leave it to the person that experienced, you know, the things they're talking about. Yeah. Because one thing we do on here, we never ever talk about things that we don't know. If we don't know it, we won't talk about it. You know, we're not going to pretend to know something that we've experienced. You know, other people might do that out there, but when you're coming here, the value that we give to it is from experience. So that's why we thought Sekhemtat was the best person to talk about these things. And she done such a wonderful job.
Yeah.
Such a wonderful job.
And I must say, Sekhemtat is one of our senior students at the school. She expresses the ability to expand lower dantian and during practice really well. So it's like a progressive expansion. It's just wonderful to have a student who's in the art who is lethal in the practice. Let me say it like that then. Yeah, someone you want on your team to direct you, give you some clarity. But we were talking about down-to-earth knowledge.
You know what? You just reminded me of something I was supposed to mention. It's in regards to the contraction of the perineum or the vagina. While you practice that, what is inevitable is you will feel aroused as you go through the practicing on your own, but that doesn't mean you need to go into it to lead to ejaculation. You're just stimulating and moving the chi and building and creating that energy that can be used to heal the body.
I mean, it's funny you say that, because it's similar for the male practice. When the male practice is, when they're doing the same exercises that we're going to discuss, yeah, there's a higher amount of sensitivity. So then it can give that same sensation, like make your body shudder as a man, or make your body tingle when you're going through that desensitization, if that's a word, desensitization of the head of the penis and along the whole shaft itself. So that is equally when you're training as a man. So then you're improving your ability to retain yourself or restrain yourself. Yeah, it's a similar process and experience. And then well, just allow yourself to calm down. So Kristos, what's going on over there then?
Yeah. So we got time to go back, and how much time are we playing with? Because you got to do what you got to do.
Let's say you got like 10 minutes.
Yeah, well, what I'll do, I'll breathe through it. Yeah, I can breathe through it. Like, but yeah, no, thank you very much, Sekhemtat.
And Sekhemtat also, she has discussed a lot of the stuff. She's discussed a lot of the stuff that I was going to mention in relation to females, because it is like this. You see, as a teacher, I may not be female, but true, the knowledge is still the same knowledge. One is able to impart the knowledge and hear the feedback. And then as a man, as I stand separate to the situation, it's not personal. So then I'm able to hear different stories and understand what's going on and appreciate it non-personally, which from a researching point of view is very useful. You know, I'm always mentioning this idea that we are like our own scientists, our own investigator. And it's through these practices here we start to truly understand how to manipulate, what to do, how to expand our internal and external consciousness. Yeah, man. It's just this journey here. Right, Kristos.
Right.
So
So
let's say you got 10 minutes and then I'll just touch. Okay.
Right. So, okay. So we talked about, just a quick recap, homeostasis. The body's trying to achieve homeostasis. The body achieves homeostasis through the endocrine system and the autonomic nervous system, part of the nervous system. Yeah. So in terms of messages, the body has many ways that it communicates with each other. The two we're going to focus on briefly is the endocrine communication and then the synaptic communication. Yeah, both of these are chemical signals. The main difference is one does it through the blood vessels and the other one does it through the actual axons and the nerve cells. Yeah. Right. So when we're looking at the endocrine system and endocrine organs, they generally release whatever hormones it needs to release. They release it via the way of the blood stream. One of the advantages of that is that, you know, hormones can stay a little bit longer in the blood system, in the circulatory system. So in these areas where you're getting the endocrine being released into the blood stream, you're going to get a high amount of capillaries, because the reason for that is it wants to optimize its ability to release the hormones in the bloodstream to get to its target organs. Yeah, so for example, when you're looking at things like insulin, which is released through the pancreas because of the high blood sugar in the body, you know, the insulin can stay in the blood for a little while longer. When we're looking on the other hand at the nervous system does that in a way which is a little bit quicker, yeah? And the reason why it wants to do it quicker in a lot of respects is, for example, because remember, it's all about maintaining homeostasis. So if we see a lion and the lion's chasing us, we don't want our hormones to be taking its time, building up in the blood. By that time, the lion would have eaten us, yeah? So we definitely want the autonomic system to work very quickly. We want all the cortisol being increased in the blood, which is a stress hormone. What that will do, that will dilate away from, it will move the blood basically away from our organs for, let's say, rest and digest, and it will start, you know, the changes in the hormone level will start increasing the blood vessels' deliverance of oxygen to our skeletal muscles. So it needs to do that just like that. So this is where the autonomic nervous system is going to be a little bit more efficient. But at the same time, you wouldn't want this type of transmission to happen in taking care of the increased sugar levels in our blood, because if it happens quickly, you know, that's not going to be effective. Right, so going through, when we're looking at this part here, again, remember everything is tying into homeostasis. So what you've got here, you've got the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. Anything to do with the parasympathetic nervous system is to do with rest and digest. Yeah, anything to do with the sympathetic nervous system is fight and flight. You know, so for example, anyone going through a near-death experience or an experience where they have to get out of a situation, you know, their pupils are going to dilate. What happens when the pupil dilates is actually taking a little bit more information, and also it's just able to react a little bit more, yeah? So you're getting more light through the eyes. It's going to stop us salivating because we don't need to eat in a state of emergency. Our heart rate's going to increase. Our lungs are going to dilate to take in more oxygen. It's not going to restrict the oxygen flow. We're not going to, our body's going to inhibit digestion because, you know, we don't need to eat anything if we need to run away from anywhere. Glucose, however, will be released and from the liver, and that's just to give us more energy to really get away. At the same time, you get other things being released from the kidneys. Again, the adrenal glands are sitting on top of the kidneys, the fight and flight response. You're going to get less movement in our intestines. You don't want to be digesting food if you need to get away. And, you know, the bladder will relax. It's not going to focus on holding the urine. And, you know, when people are scared, sometimes that's where the saying comes from, where you will see people wetting themselves in absolute fright. Yeah. The parasympathetic system is basically doing everything that the sympathetic system is doing, but in reverse, you know, because this is more geared up to rest and digest. And this is how the nervous system wants to maintain homeostasis in a very quick way, where on the other hand, the endocrine system will maintain homeostasis in a very slow, take your time type of way. All right, so let's briefly go through all the parts of the endocrine glands. So what you've got here, as we said, you've got the pituitary gland, which is the master gland. And that job is to the hypothalamus, again, is detecting the changes and the pituitary gland is responding to the detected changes. So if the hypothalamus, let's say the hypothalamus is the CEO of the company, the pituitary gland will be, let's say, the top manager, yeah? Then all the top manager does is going to send out release hormones and tell the other endocrine systems, such as your adrenal gland, such as your thyroid gland, the testes, ovaries, etc. It's going to tell them to do their job, and they're going to release hormones more directly into the blood, yeah, to have a direct effect on what it's trying to achieve. Yeah, so this is known as the master gland. Now you've got the pineal gland. Now the pineal gland is dealing with the release of melatonin and the balance of serotonin. So serotonin is what helps us with our wakefulness. When we're looking at melatonin, melatonin helps us to relax. It's a hormone that allows us to sleep. In the chakra system, this one will be regarded as the highest gland. And I believe that's because it's to do with partly the sleep component of that, which connects us to our spiritual side. The crown chakra, again, connects us to that spiritual realm. It's the realm that deals with indifference, but a kind of complete and wholeness, yeah? So now, after the pineal gland, so basically you've got the pituitary gland here and the pineal gland here. It's interesting how the pineal gland is closer to the back of the brain, and that's dealing with the occipital centers, which deal with sight and vision. Right, so after the pineal gland, you've got the thyroid and the parathyroid glands. So the thyroid gland is basically in your neck, kind of around the Adam's apple for men. And also, when you're looking at the thyroid gland, you've also got the parathyroid glands, and these are the 4 dots. And I think you can see a little bit here. This is where the parathyroid glands are. Yeah. And when you're looking at the parathyroid gland, again, they're just responsible for quite a few functions. So we got calcitonin, which deals with the bone health, etc. Calcitonin is also like a marker, which, you know, marks our cancerous cells to say that they're a little bit cancerous. Yeah, so in this way, it does deal with some level of immunity. Again, with the thyroid gland, again, with its role in the release of calcium, etc., it will deal with muscle contractions, because when you're looking at any muscle contraction, you've got a release of calcium being uptaken in what we call the synaptic cleft. And these things will help with stronger contractions. Then you've got other things like helping with heart function, brain development, and the nervous system. Yeah. And when we're looking at the parathyroid gland, they have more of a direct role in helping maintain the right amount of calcium in the blood. Yeah. So when we're looking at the thyroid gland, and this is just one of the problems when they can go wrong. So we've got something called Graves' disease. And Graves' disease is basically when the body is producing, you've got the increase in the thyroid gland, and the body is producing, you know, a lot of these thyroid hormones. And you get a lot of things like what they call Graves' disease, because the eyes begin to kind of bulge in this, you know, in a way that the person looks like they're in the grave, and that's where the name comes from. You get other things like fatigue, rapid irregular heartbeat. All of these problems can manifest because of problems with the thyroid gland. Yeah. When we're looking at the opposite, you've got hypothyroidism. And this is what we can see very commonly within the NHS setting. So with a lot of my clients, especially with musculoskeletal problems, at a certain age, all of them seem, not all of them, but a lot of them seem to have problems with hypothyroidism. And these people will be the ones that tend to heal a little bit slower, You know, you could be doing a lot of intervention, but they just need a lot more time. And their healing rate is just very slow. And hypothyroidism, some of the problems which causes it, you can get things like people who's had radiotherapy. Radiotherapy will damage some of the thyroid gland and lead to the production of less thyroid hormones being released. You also get other things like radiation or increased levels of iodine, which can even be found in treating water, etc. These things will reduce the amount of the ability for the body to produce thyroid hormones, and then you can get other things like weight gain, swollen face, you know, thin hair, which even balding in women, you know, very thin, flaky hair. These are the problems if this hormone is not quite working right. Yeah. So, interesting with this part as well, when we're looking at the thyroid gland, it's also known in the chakra system as throat chakra. It's dealing with communication, you know, it's dealing with a level of truth, you know, and it's interesting because when you correlate it to, you know, word, for example, word, sound, and power, when we're looking at the level of truth and also, you know, things like cancerous cells, you know, it being a marker for cancerous cells, you can almost correlate it to, you know, denial and, you know, not living the truth, how you can see it kind of basically relates to some of these problems that can happen. Whereas living a truthful life is also to dealing with, you know, being upright, everything being balanced. So that thyroid gland, there is, you know, a level of its connection to communication, the ability to communicate, the ability to express oneself, and also mainly by, you know, exactly where it's located. When we're looking at vibration and when we're looking at healing and when we're looking at tone and rhythm and frequency, we can almost see that having a certain level of truth, emanating a level of truth, vibrating at a certain level, can almost help to maintain a balance in things. And I believe that's where the correlation comes with the seat of truth and communication. Right, so the thymus gland. So the thymus gland is located a little bit lower than the thyroid gland. And as you can see, in adults, it really shrinks. And in newborn babies, it's quite large. And they say past, you know, being a child and the first early years of life, science will say you don't really need your thymus gland, which is, you know, not totally true, but that's at one time that was a general consensus that you can survive and you can have a good immunity without it. However, now other research is showing that with a healthy thymus gland, what happens is that people actually live a little bit longer and they do age so quickly. So when we're looking at the thymus gland, it's very important for our immune system. So it's kind of like it produces, turns lymphocytes into specialized T cells. When these T cells mature, then they get sent out into the blood. So the analogy I put here is as if, you know, the lymphocytes, you know, they're like, let's say Tai Chi students. They go into the thymus gland and they get all their training, and then they're released out into the blood with all their qualifications, all their training. They know what their tasks, they know what they have to deal with, and they deal with it well. And when you can see them, they're connected with the lymph nodes, and within these lymph nodes, you will see specialized cells ready and waiting for any pathological foreign organism to enter the body so it can destroy it. Yeah. And again, when you're looking at the thymus gland, it's very connected to the heart chakra. And the heart chakra, that's to deal with a lot of forgiveness, etc., acceptance. And again, in terms of the forgiveness, when we hold in a lot of things within ourselves, it's as if we can't raise above a certain vibration, a certain frequency. And then that can keep us trapped, anger, grief, all these things affecting the heart. You will see lots of, text about it. It will suppress our immune system and it will make us very sick. Not being able, the ability to not forgive yourself or other people is going to keep you at that heart chakra level. Your immune system is not going to be strong enough to deal with anything that's going to come your way. Yeah. So when you're looking at the chakra systems, you can make a correlation between everything. And the heart chakra has always been the chakra known that when you cross past that chakra, then you go into the higher realms. That can be synonymous to having a healthy thymus gland, then, being able to deal with the lower elements of oneself to deal with the higher elements and the higher chakras, etc. Okay, so now moving on quickly to the pancreas. So the pancreas is known as an endocrine gland, but it also has other functions like releasing digestive enzymes to help with the digesting process. And it's not every single place of the pancreas which is endocrine, but they're only in places called islets of Langerhans, and that's just basically a name named after a guy who supposedly discovered it. And when you're looking at the pancreas, it will help with the release of insulin, which we all may be aware of because of diabetes. It will release insulin if blood sugars are too high. But again, if the blood sugars are too low, it will release glucagon. Yeah? So that maintains the balance of our sugars. All right. So moving on, we got the adrenal glands, and they're located, we do forget about the relationship to the kidneys. And we do forget that the adrenal glands, when we see kidneys, we just usually see a picture of the kidneys, but we do often see the picture of the kidneys and the adrenal glands. So the adrenal glands are very important because they, again, as explained earlier, they deal with the fight and flight. They release cortisol in the blood. Cortisol will help get us prepared for a situation that we need to get out of. Sekhemtat was talking about the kidneys and the store place of energy and chi. Again, the correlation, you need that extra energy to actually be able to do whatever you need to do. And when you hear the stories of children being trapped underneath a car, a mother's fight and flight response, and she's lifting up the car on her own, you can see the correlation between energy, cortisol, the fight and flight response. Yeah,
So,
and
Kristos,
yes.
because that's like a perfect moment to ask a question. And the question is about how does the daily experience of racism or trauma impact on these glands?
Yeah. Well, it became perfect timing because this is just one syndrome. Yeah. But when we're looking at syndromes, again, we're looking at everything on a scale and on a continuum. So Cushing's syndrome is basically an extreme of what happens when excessive cortisol is in the body. Yeah, you get a lot of, the rounding of the face, you easily prone to bruising, you get the situation where you got thin arms and legs, a big stomach, losing the hair, etc. But they're also showing that it increases the risk of high blood pressure and diabetes. But they're saying Cushing's syndrome increases the risk of high blood pressure and diabetes. But without Cushing's syndrome, a high level of cortisol is going to increase your risk of high blood sugar and diabetes because they're kind of one and the same thing when you're looking at it that way. With this particular disease, it usually only happens when your adrenal glands have become damaged, or if there's a tumor growing on it, or if the pituitary gland, which is a master gland, becomes a little bit, if there's a tumor on it, or if it's damaged in any other way. When we're looking at the prolonged stress in the community, etc., again, we're going to get depleted energy levels over time. You know, we're going to feel more fatigued. We're going to feel more tired. And chronic stimulation and chronic cortisol being released in the body, you know, it does become a little bit poisonous to the body. Poisonous in the sense that we're meant to go through our fight and flight moment, but we're not meant to be going over it perpetually. Our body becomes less desensitized to actually what it needs to do. So if your body's always releasing cortisol, it's not going to react as well with the release of cortisol. The cortisol is going to damage our body long term, cause a host of problems. Then, you know, emotionally, we need to supplement that with something. And we're going to go with the foods, we're going to go with the alcohols. And that will also cause a lot of problems. Yeah. Any other questions on that, or elaboration from yourself? You're looking intrigued.
Oh, you can see me now, because I swear last time you said that you can't see nobody. No, I was just looking at the question: how can you repair high cortisol levels as part of repatriation?
Oh, was that the question there?
There's a couple of questions down there.
How can we repair high cortisol levels as part of reparation?
Oh, the word.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I would say about that? It is the same internal cultivation. It is a burden that's been passed on mentally. I know a part of that as well is genetic, because we have our DNA, or should I say, sorry, RNA, transformed over time due to trauma and stress, and that is stored within the DNA. That's passed on to generation, and this can go on like 16 generations. So yeah, there is a large part of that which is DNA. So that is the point of Qigong. That is the point of Shen Gong. This is the point of, that's why the tree treasures was truly treasures. The transformation or the transmutation of the changing, the repair of your DNA. And this is what Qigong masters will discuss and talk about, as I talk about here. It is the repair of your DNA signature, which when you start practicing in a very short time, you will start to experience. And we think this is repair of muscle, ligaments and tissues. We think it's just a repair of the way we think, the way we feel. We just think it's just an incorporation of the space around us and being able to connect with that. But all that is expressed through the blueprint of your DNA. Your DNA has all this information and it's just awoken and activated. Certain parts of this thing here within this nucleus is not getting the right type of voltage to activate the cell over a period of time with the right type of pressure building up. Yeah, man.
Because in reality, as you're saying, I mean, for example, if a person comes to me, we're talking about NHS setting. You know, I've seen people with Graves' disease, etc. For one, they come to you with a musculoskeletal problem. You know, the reality of that is they're going to have a musculoskeletal problem, of course, because there's so much hormonal imbalances. But again, what they need something a little bit more than the NHS setting of just physiotherapy, you know? And this is where you go into the Qigong and stuff like that. Because when you're operating, you know, with just a totally Western medical model based on dealing with something like Graves' disease, you can with hormone replacements and etc., but it's not dealing with the emotional side of things, you know. And a lot of the times, the emotional side of things needs to be dealt with. You can't just deal with something, the baggage and mental strain and the mental, you know, problems that is created with these diseases. Your whole body image has changed. Okay, fine. You see your consultant, you have the whatever hormonal changes they need to give you. But at the same time, if you're not dealing with the mental, emotional aspect of it, which may have caused the problem to
in the first place,
come in the first place, which research is starting to show interesting things, then you're never really going to deal with the problem in full way. Right, so the last one, I don't need to touch on this too much. I just thought I put some positive images here at the same time. Sekhemtat explained about the ovaries, etc. Basically, the gonads, the testes and ovaries, produces testosterone, estrogen for female, and gives the two sexes their distinct qualifications. Yeah. Right, so yeah, that is that.
all right. So it looks like you
sharing.
It looks like you opened the way. Build on what Kristos has been talking about. This whole the gonads, should I say, the last part, and the testes, which you didn't decide to go into, which the Sekhemtat has already expanded really well into, which is the whole science. Yes, Kristos, what you said?
I don't know if it's just my screen, but it's a little bit blurry. I don't know if Sekhemtat's seen the same thing.
It's the same thing. I think it's connection issues.
Okay.
Or is it like that? All right, we're just gonna have to bear with us. All right, so as we're going through this balancing of these these hormones and glands, the nervous system, this Kristos Sekhemtat already covered these areas here, which is basically we require a certain type of lifestyle and diet. I mean, there are 6 areas usually, but I'm just focusing on just the 3 of them. So we do require diet, special type of foods. We do require exercise and a certain type of exercise. We also need to practice certain sexual disciplines. And that also includes hygiene as well. That is a part of the whole thing. So as we keep on discussing this pelvic floor, we've had so much talk about it. This is just an opportunity just to appreciate where it is. Because it is right, if we just look at on the left-hand side for a moment, looking at the male genitalia, where you can see at the bottom the pelvic floor. So this is the muscle that sits right at the bottom. In Qigong, we call that the Hu Ying point. And the Hu Ying means like ocean bed. A word something like this, like the bottom of the ocean. It's like you can't go there's nowhere else to go beyond the ocean bed. And this is like the Hu Ying. So the same on the right hand side of the female, where you can see the pelvic floor. And you can see how these major areas, which is the rectum, the vagina itself, and the urethra, how these pass in this space. And the same for the men, where the prostrate sits right on top of the pelvic floor. So when we're contracting this space, male or female, we're directly going to contract and stimulate these particular organs. And this is really important, the stimulation of these organs here. So it's a little bit more clearer, that around here we have all these different muscles. So when we're contracting, male or female, when you're looking at the central space between the labia or the vagina there and the anus for the woman, and then between, well, you can't see the scrotum there, but the base of the penis and the anus, it's this place here that we're really looking to focus upon. And in Chinese medicine, in ancient Taoist and Taoist practice, this is called Hu Ying, the Hu Ying point. And the conception vessel is what is meant by CV. So this is one of the primary meridian channels that moves up the front. And then we have one that moves at the back, 12 in general. And then we have 8, which we in Tai Chi focus upon. Although we always are talking about the three Dantian, but we have these meridian lines that really help us to give clarity. And this is the place where it all culminates, it all comes together. So when lost there, everything has the same effect. Everything drops out of itself. So this point here, male and female, is the point when it comes to sexual alchemy that we really need to focus our attention on. And when contracting here, we're able to improve circulation of blood of the vessels, stimulate the nervous system. It's a very interesting thing when stimulating this place. It's a similar experience for male and female. As a man, though, I can explain that it's like a rhythmic pulse. When you contract this space, you know, Sekhemtat mentioned it's like about 300 times, and you start to tonify the area. It's like a wave that starts to take place. It's like a massaging that comes up, and it's also expressed in the same way for females. It's like you're creating a wave. I want to actually mention that one exercise in a moment. All right, so this Hu-Yin point is what we call here holding the one. Most vital technique here, holding that 1 point, holding the 1 point, and trying to not activate your anus. And there are techniques where you contract the whole space, the anus, Hu-Yin, and lower dantian, and you pull them all 3 in. And there are times to do that technique, and you will learn that on the course actually, how to activate and strengthen, tonify it. So then, but it's difficult to separate between the 2 spaces. Everything just go. It's like you contract your perineum and then the anus just move. But we want it to be very subtle. So in this sexual alchemy and the cultivation of Jing, we also require this knowledge of guarding the one. And the guarding the one is the actual lower dantian itself. And it is this clarity and awareness, keeping your mind on your dantian and being aware of this. So that is life. That is through exercise. That is also through sexual practice. Maintaining a constant connection with your breath through the whole process. When everything starts, for men, when things start to escalate, then you deepen into your breath. And it's the same for women. When the experience starts to feel like it's going all over this place and you focus into your breath, it's like there's just an opportunity for the energy, as Sekhemtat mentioned, not to rise, but to diffuse through the whole body. This is the power of guarding the one. And, you know, there are many imagery that I've seen by chance. So I put that little one there, which is used in Taoism to represent this garden of the one. It's like nurturing of a baby. Like you have to treat your lower dantian like this. You have to protect it. We call it cultivation, but it's like this is just the nurturing of this immortal seed. And it's just amazing. I don't know if I'm allowed to for 30 seconds as it come to me. Just to go on a little tangent here. Because I was, I heard a mythology which I hadn't heard for a little while. And it's the story of Isis, or Aset and Heru. Aset and Heru. And the birth of Heru, because we know it's just the nurturing of this child, and it come like, we just get this awareness in this moment here. But then between setting up Ussa, so therefore creating a coffin, so then, you know, measurements and body size and everything, create the coffin, push, they set a banquet, and it was like a little trick where it was only meant for him, for his size, so it doesn't matter who fit in there. It's not gonna be the correct size for them. So everyone in the banquet must have jumped into it. It's a laugh, it's a joke, and it's all right. Come to Asar's time, and then he jump into it, talk about these 72 that come and they close the coffin, they seal it tight, and they throw it out into the river. The thing come. I'm gonna come to the part why this story come to me. So you get thrown into the river by these 72 co-conspirators, which is really, when you get into the esoterics of it, it's just the stars and the constellations and the deacons, or the division of this space. So he's floating down the water in the sarcophagus, and then he ends up in Syria. And it's like it grows, the sarcophagus grows into a beautiful sycamore tree, I think it is, with him inside of this. And the aroma is beautiful. So the king of Syria, on a hunt, smells this aroma, decides to cut the tree down, and then brings it into his kingdom. So Aset now looking for a husband, right? This is where we're coming to it. I don't know if I'm saying it quick enough. So Aset is looking for her husband now. So she's going through the land, roaming, looking for, and this is the divine mother, you know. This is the aspect of the true yin, this true mystical force that is now in manifestation. We are always yin and yang. If you understand it, we can express it further. She ends up in the kingdom in Syria. She smells this aroma. She knows that's her husband. So then she gets a job as a nanny, as a nurse, to look after the king's child. So what she does with the king's child, obviously she's looking day by day, but then because she's immortal, she's a goddess, she starts nurturing him. And this is the part of what comes to me when I'm looking at this baby here. She starts nurturing him in the fire, this immortal fire, the fire to transform into an immortal being. So then she knows the tones and the tune, the tones and the words to say. So then what would happen? She will put him into the fire, and then she will float around like a bird singing as this is taking place. She will transform as a bird flying around. Then at the end of the ritual and the dance of the tone that she's singing, then she will come take him out of the fire. One day, and someone come in and see this story take place, she transforms back, and she brings, so ultimately the child doesn't become immortal, and she ends up getting Osar, and then they go and end up going off to make Peru in the story here. But the reason why I mention it is because this is all lower Dantian cultivation. I would have to go through that thing there to explain that, but that is the reason why I mentioned that. That is the story of internal cultivation to create the hero. It's true, it's elixir, it's the blending of the two forces. So
interesting story. So what was the repercussion of her not finishing?
The repercussion was that he never become immortal. That's the repercussion of the incomplete process.
So it's what I'm getting from it is doing the work, but the work has to be completed to a stage.
Yes, it's true. And then the thing is, she received her husband, and then she went off to what they call a bed of reeds, and through the intermingling of the two of them, created the immortal child, Heru, the godchild, God King, however you want to describe it, the perfect one. However you want to look at Heru, the master of time and space, it come like it's the same thing. So that work was incomplete with an incomplete form. But then she was able to produce something of herself that was greater than that. And this is one of the themes actually in a lot of primordial mythology, that a woman has an ability to create something that is terrifying and most wonderful, simultaneously hideous, but most gracious and perfect in its form. And she has the ability to do this without the support of her spouse. Right, this is mythology, and I'm getting a bit, I'll go off on mythology all of a sudden, but that's gnosis. But we're going to come back for a moment. We do have something like this discussion going on in a few weeks' time, going into connecting all this ancient mythology into it. But they are constantly talking about these themes here, but we look at them if you don't practice a certain way, if you don't live a certain life, if you haven't seen certain things, if you don't train a certain way, there are things you will never be privy to and experience, and you will see it in a mundane way until you live a life a certain way, do a certain practice, and then you will truly understand something a bit different. So this is the space. Go on, Kristos.
No, I'm saying thank you. It makes, just by saying that story, it's funny how mythology makes you understand the picture clearer.
I'm telling you. And mythology is like layers of layers. That's why it was just that moment I have this kind of realization. That there are so many multiple layers within mythology. You'll see it one way, you'll understand one thing. And then all of a sudden, when you start, you're thinking about one thing, and the brain is just a beautiful thing. Because that's what you spoke about. The synapses, well, you didn't really go too deep into that. But the synapses being able to interface with each other, interconnect, and having a whole neural network connection to the whole body. Yeah.
Interested to see what's on this slide now.
You see? Because, you know, I'm like, right now, I'm sliding through. So this anatomy here is would show the connection of where Dantian is in relation to the internal space. Because you would have the navel in front of this, where you have your lumbar vertebrae and your L5, your L5, S1, L4 kind of location. But then you're going generally a few inches inwards, depending upon the person and their width and their size. So Dantian isn't an external place. The Garden of the One is not an outside job, basically. You're not the guard who's sitting outside the door, you know, in this sense. You're like the guard who is actually guarding the person inside, standing beside them. Yeah. It's not way outside the door and say the golden child goes inside, in this case, the emperor or the empress. Nah, man, you just walk beside them all the way and watch them grow and nurture them. This is the Dantian. And it's amazing because that film, The Golden Child, has come straight back into my mind because it come like the same thing. All right.
It's funny because it makes me think of this statement, which is conquering the world. And I remember when you mentioned it, you expressed that it is not the world outside of you that you are conquering, but the world inside of you that you are conquering. So that statement or explanation you gave, it made me think of that.
That is exactly what it is. That you are conquering the demons that are within us or within you. And that's how the thing always is. I done a presentation the other day discussing this on this infinite love. Didn't get too deep into it, as that seems to be the bane of my reality. I just end up touching the surface when it comes to these kind of moments. There's so much information, but the darkness that dwells within us is what needs to be embraced. And it's interesting that you say a statement like that, Sekhemtat, and we rest upon the cavities internally. And I'm not sure how you two even see this here, because within these cavities, within this pelvic cavity and abdominal cavity and the thoracic cavity of pressure, I'm always telling the students about the pressure that build up. And chi flow initially was a thing where it's hard for people to understand how does chi flow. And we say chi flow with blood, energy flow with blood. How does it move though? How does this flow take place? How does it move from one place to another? And this is through pressure. And it's through the pressure shifting of these different cavities is how we bring health. So these are like the major cavities that we're actually manipulating when practicing Qigong. And it's through the stabilizing of these cavities, which we called homeostasis. But we are looking at it from a Western point of view in that description there. But then when we go into Qigong, then we're looking at these cavities. And when you go into even ancient like ancient Greek science, the same thing. We're talking about these cavities, these holes, these 9 of them, throughout the body. So the cavity is the thing that generally is causing the problem, because that stagnant energy, that stagnant flow, that stagnant organ, the cavity itself is held or encased in fascia.
Mm-hmm.
So then the fascia itself then would be restricted, it would be stuck. Mm-hmm. And then as one area is filled, so let's just give a very brief example then. You see, let's say the abdominal cavity, but let's look at the upper left-hand quadrant of the abdominal cavity. And in that space there, you have what was so elegantly explained earlier on about the spleen. However, the spleen, the spleen operates also with, they have a secondary organ. It works in conjunction with another organ. So when we're dealing with all these trust issues that we're working through, we also have a dysfunction that takes place with the stomach. Also the pancreas, because the three of them is one unit: pancreas, stomach, and spleen.
It's interesting you said that, because when you're looking at even acupuncture, the stomach and the spleen meridian are known as the grounding meridians.
That's the earth, because that's the earth energy. Mm-hmm. And that's why it comes to that self-value, that self-trust, that stability, that sense of groundedness. So when we know this is, we say, not functioning optimally from a cavity point of view, then we can experience a lot of gas, flatulence, as a result of the stomach area there, because the cavity in itself is, the pressure is out of alignment. The pressure through the whole abdominal area is stuck. And I don't know how many people have heard this talk here from their grandparents talk about they have pressure stuck up into their back, or they feel the pressure down in their lower back or something. They feel wind trap. Not even wind trap in spleen area, you know, or in this belly area that they want to belch, but wind trap in the back of the neck. And these are all these same cavities where the pressure is out of balance. And this is what we're working through when we're starting to practice our unblocking techniques. When we're restoring vitality, these cavities start to repressure themselves. Don't even really know it.
So when you're saying cavity, I'm just hearing acupuncture points.
Yeah, but the acupuncture points though, Kristos, they'll be like the zip, like the thread.
Yes, yeah.
Thread to the actual space, to the sac. So these are sacs, aren't they?
Well, you're right, because even when you're dealing with acupuncture, it's about how far the needle is going.
Yeah. How deep are you? Because that's what it comes like. It's like when you're like, you know, in the joint itself, we talk about crepitus. And then that's because it's a build-up of pressure due to nitrogen build-up. Then you do certain technique and you hear a pop or a sudden or click sound. That means on a physical level, you release the pressure in that joint there. And as you said, that sound like that's similar to acupuncture. When you invest into a certain layer of it, like you're releasing the pressure in that space there, and then also incorporating voltage into it as well. Releasing the pressure.
Wow. I mean, what you're saying is very valuable. I don't think people realize actually how valuable it is, because, you know, I could tomorrow speak to, I don't know, my orthopedic consultant, or I can speak to experienced practitioners. But the way you've put the clarity in there, it makes so much sense, you know, and it's something that is, like a lot of things, is very underappreciated. And I can tell that this knowledge didn't just come about by reading books, didn't just come about by someone telling you, it came about by an experience. And it's an experience that you've put yourself through.
Yeah.
When you're saying that now, I'm like, wow. Now that information has added another dimension in my thinking in terms of, actually, because I practice acupuncture and all of these things, I'm thinking, actually, so the acupuncture points and what you're saying and the crepitus, and then you think of manipulations and you can see how someone who's very good at manipulation can heal a problem that's been so chronic just in one click.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. But
the pressure.
You have to go through a level of experience to even begin to understand also what you're saying. So again, this is why I really recommend that, people do come on this course, because again, you're going to understand something that you don't know that you don't know.
You say, even though you didn't know it.
Or maybe you have an idea, but you just need to go through the experience. And when you're looking at health and longevity, this is what it's all about. It's very simple, but it's not presented or people don't understand. And this is why, when we're looking at the community, why we're going through so many health problems, because we moved away from a practice.
It's true. We're not incorporating these practices, but we do practice many a different technique, but they're not held to. Imagine holding the one and guarding the one here allows for all these different cavities to function optimally. Imagine doing these rhythmic contractions of the perineum space and incorporating that with the dantian and the rhythmic compression breath will shift the pressure of all this space. So all now we're really waiting to take place is just the expansion of it, the opening of these different vessels. And that is what you're talking about there now, which truly is only through time. That's why I'm always saying, we come and it's not even, every time I even say that, we are like the greatest investigators of our own self. We have to become a scientific investigator. I always say that, but who comes to my mind is always Shakyamuni Buddha, the Buddha. He always comes to my mind. As soon as I say that, because he is written to be one of the greatest scientific investigators of the self who's lived in our recent time, even though it's a couple of 1,000 years ago. So I think we're going to move on. We haven't got much more time. And I think, because I'm even unsure what's going on, what I've got set up next. So within these different spaces, we're going to split between this thoracic, the upper area, and the pelvic lower area. You have fluid that flow in this space, the same fluid that we were talking about earlier on. That's why this extracellular fluid is so important. But within these cavities, you have lubrication of the different organs, which allows for the slide, allows for the shift. We have like great protectors. So let's say we're looking on the anterior side, which is the front of the body. And then you have what they call the greater ornamentum, which is they call the policeman, the one that go over the front and it protects. It's like filled with fat and fascia and all this connective tissue, but it goes over and it allows for the tissues to have a protection, but also to slide effectively as well. So this space is just so important when it comes to holding the one. Then you're rhythmically, if you look at the bottom there, like pumping. That is why Hu Ying is said to be the bottom of the ocean. Right at the bottom of the ocean. But right at that fluid, that flow, perineal fluids, that flow through is what we're pumping through, and which as a result, again, not just the movement of space, but also the transference of nutrients, of neurochemicals, information, It just allow for, this is why I will say something like the body is liquid light. And I know when I say that, most people, or when I say that to students, I know it's like, yeah, the body is liquid light. But when you start understanding the body, you start to realize there is far more liquid underneath the skin that we see the skin. There's far more liquid here than we appreciate here. And it's this liquid that is stagnant. That's where, because you know, this is how the electricity flows. It's like a saline solution. So that perineal fluid, vital. I don't think I need to go into this one here.
Yeah, what about the ground substance? Is it related to that? The ground substance, or
to the, because I know the ground substance is that the element within the fascia you're talking about there. Yeah, that we're talking about, the stuff that keeps the fascia bounded or elastic.
Yeah, the element that makes up one of the three components of the fascia. So you've got the collagen, the elastin, and then you've got the ground substance, and it's always depicted as like a spider's web thread and like a little bit of liquid.
Well, you know when you see like videos of fascia and you see them zoomed in, so you see it's the same thing you just described there, like you see a spider's web. When I've spent so much time watching these things, like you see water droplets, just like how you see, it's like that's how the liquid is almost transported as well along the those tentacles.
Yes,
that spider-like structure.
Yeah. And it's
hope everyone's still with me there. Yeah, is everyone still keeping up? Am I talking way too quick? Right? Do I need to slow my talk down?
Oh, no, they're loving it. Let's see.
Okay, brilliant.
No, still with you, they're saying. Still with you.
You know, I jumped. Hold on, what happened there? The reason why I was jumping, you know, when your heart rate starts to increase, when the heart starts to beat faster. This is during during sexual practice, when you're engaging with your partner. Your blood starts to flow far more effectively. So the breath is used to control and to bring down a long, deep breath, yeah, will allow for more blood to flow, but your heart rate goes down. So it allows for more nutrients to fill up the whole body. So your body's already experienced this neurological explosion during your sexual, when you're with your partner. So the blood itself starts to increase. So we need to take control of that, because ultimately, the faster the blood is moving through the body, then the more likely that a man's going to release. So we need to take a hold of this blood connection. And the same with women. So as they get to a more state of orgasm, the heart rate again starts to increase. Now, this can cause either a woman to go into a state of not too good, or let's say uncontrollable physical movements, or fear, worry, negative thoughts start to come up. The head starts to get filled with more blood, overthinking. So the same with the woman, controls her breath. She takes control of her heart rate. All that starts to calm down. And then the experience starts to expand again. So I had to just go back into that to bring that, make that relevant for men. So briefly, here, there are a few texts here that talk about the regularity of a man releasing, how frequent a man should let go or ejaculate his semen. And this one here is taken from the Yellow Emperor. I only going to discuss one in this moment here, because last time when that question was asked, we are generally given answer to, as we are investigators, this our own scientists through our own experience, and then we give this appreciation and a generalness as we're working through. So Yellow Emperor, because in that text here, I don't know if anyone though this ancient classic. There are many who say the Yellow Emperor, this text is one of the oldest texts, or it's definitely the oldest text of medicine. And it talks there about how one should release, ejaculate. And the plain girl, but it seemed like in this text here, he didn't want to have sex. It's like, he's all right. And it's like, give me a good reason, yeah? This is the Emperor telling me. And the plain girl isn't like to say the plain girl is, let's say, a woman who of the highest standard then, and has mastered this technique, has mastered love technique, whatever that means in this time here and that time there, but she got that there. So he's like to her, like, what's the point anyway? Because I'm all right. Like, I'm quite satisfied right now. So her reply to that argument is, boy, if you don't use it, as Sekhemtat said, you're going to lose it. It's like she was saying about the clitoris. If you have, what is it, an extension of the clitoris, our pineal, penile, our penis, extension of this thing here. If you don't use it, you're going to lose it. So this is the reasoning to these timings. So in the ancient classic of the Yellow Emperor, it says here that for a man that's 20 years old, 2 times a day is all right. But if you're a man of lesser strength, more inferior specimen, then we're looking at just once. A man in his 30s, once a day. If a lesser man, every 2 days, once every 2 days, so every other day. Then it goes to about 50. Every 5 days you can release. But if you're a man of lesser strength, then you can every 10 days. A man of 60, once every 10 days. A more inferior man, again, once every 20 days. And for a healthy 70-year-old, we're looking at once a month. And then for a inferior, a man that is in his 70s, but is not of good health, never. So this is what is said by the Yellow Emperor. This never could probably come a bit earlier, because there is another gentleman, I'm just going to say that briefly, that he spoke of for men, that after 100 times of having intercourse with a woman, on the 100th time you can release. And this man outlived a few emperors. I think 3 of them he outlived, this gentleman there, and he wrote a text on art of longevity and life. And this is how he justified how he lived his life so long, that he never ejaculated each time. It was only after 100 times. And if you can do this from a young age, you're good. The sooner you can do that, the better. From these ancient Taoist man. So retention is the way, but we do require to release periodically. And there's much debate to release, not to release. Let's say it is something that's constantly filled. So that in itself is a state of stagnancy. So when something is filled too long, it does need to be emptied. And we're talking about energy flow. But that emptying is usually done in the sense of the energy moving back up. So through the Huyin, or through the holding the one and guarding the one technique, there is this repumping back up of the semen itself through breathing. But this practice here is something that's done over time, and the body is doing its own thing. You can have intention to do that, but through correct breathing, you will start to feel pulsation take place in these areas here. So I think I have a few minutes left, and as I already start this talk on the sexual practices, how much deeper can we get into it? This is how much deeper we can get. For you women, we got one technique here, because been talking all that stuff about the men. That's just the reason why I put this one right here, because it feels like for a moment I just be on about men. You see, and just like what Sekhemtat was talking about, the eggs there to be utilized for internal massage. Some talk about 1, some talk about 3. just read about this. I've spoken to many a woman that utilize such a thing, and it seemed like this is a technique which is extremely beneficial. So you don't require for this one though, the use of an egg. This is, so you see this pelvic floor you're seeing there, yeah? This muscle at the basin right there. And you see these two holes there, the big hole and the little hole, and then that space in between them, just before the pubic bone. So what we are going to do, all you women, this is the technique here, and it's done, let's say, 10 times as one set. So what you would do, you'll contract your perineum, and you're taking a deep breath in. But as you do that now, that space, that perineum space, you're going to contract it even more so and feel as if that contraction goes up the front of your vagina, up into the space of your belly button. As you're breathing in and contracting like this, you're also gripping your toes. So you're going to grab your toes as you're breathing in. You're going to pull in your pelvic floor, and you're going to contract it enough where you feel the front of your pelvis come forward, as if you're drawing all of it up your front. And as you do that as well, you're contracting through here all the way to your fingers. So then you curl up your fingers, and then you just relax. You take a deep breath in, you grip your toes, you contract perineum all the way up for the 3 to 4 seconds to your fingertips, and then you just relax. And this is the up draw technique, upwards draw, because you're drawing everything beneath all the way up to the front of the body. And you know, for us men, when we start doing this rhythmic contraction of this perineum space, yin, it's a similar kind of thing that is experienced. That's why it's almost like it doesn't really make much difference, because I experienced that. I'm talking about a pulsation, and it feels, the technique described for a woman to do, although the technique is different for a man for practice, what a woman experiences in the sense of the external sensations, and I'm talking about the additional parts, because you women have a whole heap of additional parts going on here to us men. Talking about the general frontal aspect of the body. Yeah, I suppose for us men, it just is a bit more focused, where you feel the testicles and the base of the penis actually rhythmically move as well. So that you will do 10 times, and that, as Sekhemtat was describing, is to stimulate your clitoris, your vagina, to also enhance the sensation that you experience during sexual intercourse. This is the purpose of this technique. So you just are engaged with the whole of your body, and you're able to tense all the way through with your breath and in control. I hope that explanation there was to the point. Men, if you are circumcised, you kind of probably okay, because of the constant sensitivity of rubbing trousers and all them things there. For us, those who are not, or everyone else, we do a technique called sharpening the knife. But right now, we're not gonna go into them one day. But it's our technique for to desensify the tip of the penis, but also the shaft. But those are the techniques that we're going to describe in our second week. And then in that sense, I'll take the men aside for a few moments, and we'll just have a discussion about that. Yeah, sometimes privacy like this is good. Especially the description of the techniques. So we have 2 slides left. So we have men have a way to desensitize themselves. A woman have a way to increase her sensitivity. And we are uniting both of these opposite energies together to make one. Now, I have this image there of Kali, because it's just the thoughts that when these 2 energies don't move, then there's pure destruction. And you have to submit as a man to a woman far more than probably men want to. And submitting to a woman's all right. It's okay. But that one there has to be done far more often than what society generally teaches and allows. There is a power and a force in a woman, which is, as man know, if unleashed and not controlled in a certain way, is ability to destroy everything. And that ability to destroy everything, man have it too, but that's not what I'm saying here. It's just the force within the woman is just expanded, accentuated. She have, let's say, 2 X's as opposed to we have the 1 X. If we're going to talk about energetic geometry, where there's just more information. So there's just more energy flowing through. There's more synapses. This is the way the thing is. So when all these emotions go all out over the place, when these organs aren't functioning, when there is stress, trauma from past experiences, then you just have to know how to be there beside the woman as a man and support this, the calming down. Transfer Kali back to Parvati. Yeah, sure, Parvati, not Durga. And she only turned to this because he cut the head off of Ganesh, but that's just a story for another time. And I believe that is it. So let me just unshare that.
Good, yeah, that was really good.
You see, I try my best to wow, I didn't even realize that I was so dark there. We're gonna put the light on.
Yeah, how is everyone feeling?
Hope I never went too fast, but we'll get a chance to discuss these things at the on the course, definitely. And we will always go a bit deeper than when doing presentation, and it's always a bit more personal with correct. There's so much knowledge and information here. When you ask a specific question, it just gets what you require. And other than that, we just say what the ancestors allow to flow through, the energy allows to just express.
It's not limited, it goes into so many dimensions. It truly is like the synaptic connections, everything connected to each other and so holistic, you know. And I think the more we view health, living like this, the more, you know, healthier we'll be, the more overstanding we will be. And everything else in life will just be easy just from doing a few forms of practices.
You know what I'm waiting for, Kristos? I'm waiting for a whole generation. We like, there's only a few people that practice Qigong or the internal arts. And so there are only a few, let's say, let's be specific then, from our community that practice such a thing. So you don't really see it in the elders too much, this kind of practice. It's usually embedded in religion. So I say that I would just like to see a whole new generation of Qigong practitioners who invest in the internal. Qigong is different from yoga or such an art. The whole art of Qigong was to heal the body, to heal the organs. And that's directly through direct technique. And I know yoga has this element in its original form, but there just seems to be, it's gone more mechanical. And unless you're graced with a person who understands the internal function in yoga, you're going to get a very mechanical form of yoga to open the limbs.
Well, it's true. I mean, if I personally, if I wanted to be a yoga instructor, I can go on a few-week course.
That's what I'm saying. Imagine that. You said 2 weeks.
A few. I mean.
Can't be a month. Let's just say a month then. You can go on a month course.
I think I can get one in about a few weeks, not that long at all.
Wow.
And I will be certified yoga instructor.
Interesting.
But there's differences between, because, for example, if I go on a quick yoga course, there can be someone else going on definitely an advanced course, but unless you see the people practicing,
You don't know.
you won't really know what's what, and that's the difference. You know, when people are listening to you, we know it's not a 2-week course you've been on. Course. You know, it's more like a 20-year course.
I'll be getting downloads while I'm talking, and I'm like to myself, oh gosh, I'm going off on a tangent here. I'm just getting all this information. That's like, yeah. It always happens. The brain wants everything to be one. And it wants to connect all the dots all the time. Everything wants to just be a constant flow of oneness.
Yeah. And that's the difference.
Because someone said that earlier on about the body being amazing. And how does the body know how to do all that stuff there? How does the body know? Yeah.
Well, I think that 1 gram of DNA, or even less than that, is like 100,000 gigabytes.
Yeah.
Or 1 trillion gigabytes.
Yeah.
You know.
Held in that little space there.
Yeah.
And then all of it is just based on resonant frequency, and everything being able to harmonize itself. But once out of resonant frequency, and I say all that in the past, this bioelectric field being out of phase, when the body's out of phase, or when the body's in phase, I'm talking about electrons spinning at a certain rate, then it just seems that this is how everything is possible. The geometry, the building block of life, is because things are able to build in a fractal nature. I know I'm getting all scientific with how I'm describing it, and then it requires an explanation. Even my explanation requires the explanation, but all that stuff we just go through as we go through the course, and as we spend more time together, just get the deeper understanding.
Because we still have some positions available still for the 6-week or the 12-week course, where, as Sahu mentioned, we will dive deeper into the science and the art of what it is that we do to get an understanding and a reconnection back with the body, to recognize the signs our body gives us when it is in need of attention and a bit more care. And I think what it is we should remember is we don't pay attention to the body when it is in a negative state. We constantly show the attention and the care it desires to maintain it in a particular place. Because by the time sometimes you realize that something's going on, it may be too far gone. So then the journey back is even heavier. So it's definitely important to keep an eye on where we are emotionally and physically. And this Qigong course, what we are showing, what we will be given, provides you the opportunity to understand what your body means when it does something and how to rectify the situation. I did put in the chat a link to the 6-week course, and I also put the link for the 12-week course, as well as our email. So you can reach out to us via email if you have any additional questions. But please check the links out. Give us a shout. Let us know your interest.
Yeah. I think we shall be finishing in a few moments. I think there's this one more thing that I think to mention, other than the course itself, that over the weeks and months, we'll be delivering presentations, probably either once or twice a month, depending. Or we'll let everyone know ahead of time. We'll email everybody, or we will looking to create a WhatsApp group or something like this with everyone's details in it or a number, so we can just post them way there, because I keep on hearing how come I'm missing everything. But we got few little ones coming up, like 3 presentations breaking down all the stuff we're talking about. But you know, we just have to sometimes one topic at a time. Because sometimes, because everything is so intermixed, and everything's so connected, I just be talking about so many things simultaneously. I tried to, but I would like to just slow down just for a few moments and just home in on different sections. That's what we're going to be doing over the next few months. So then all we're learning on these courses here, it will give those people who have taken the course an opportunity to have a deeper understanding. That is the reason why we're doing all of this. But everyone else benefits. Everyone benefits from that. Yeah.
Dress code. So what do we need to wear this Saturday?
Just well, everyone who's on there is going to receive a t-shirt, and depending on how people flow anyway. Some people wear that, some people have to take it home and wash that. Wear that next time. T-shirt and a vest, and a tracksuit bottom, trainers, light clothing ultimately. Make sure you bring water. There is changing room there. So you do have an opportunity to go and use the changing room. There's also a kitchen. Can't say that you don't need to be cooking food, but you have the opportunity to utilize such a space there long enough. There's fridge there, isn't there, Kristos?
There's a fridge there.
Yeah, man, it's a nice little space. It's a self. It's like a unit that can look after itself. A few toilets. I don't think there's shower there though. There's no shower. Huh?
There's no shower.
Okay.
There's no shower.
Yeah, that's the only thing.
I don't think anyone's ever needed a shower from previous times.
It's true. And even though the sun is hot and the sweating is hard, yeah, I don't think it's necessary. But yeah, you got everything that you require in that little space there.
So there's elevators. If anyone's got any disabilities, you can get a wheelchair up the stairs, so that wouldn't be any difficulties. Yeah. There is local.
I think we're on the first floor.
Shops nearby. Second floor. Yeah, it's the second one. But that's the first hall when you're going up the stairs. So it's technically the second floor. There's shops nearby. There will be parking, plenty of parking, especially on the weekend, free parking. So for those of you who are driving, plenty of spaces. What else is there nearby? Yeah, plenty of toilets, plenty of everything that you need for the Tai Chi. It's a good space.
Got food around the place there in Elephant and Castle or on Woolworth Road there. There's a lot of food places along there. So there's a lot of options in that space there.
There's a lot of new food places as well.
That place there's constantly growing. So is there anything you want to say there, Sekhemtat?
Well, thank you to everyone who stayed online, listened to our conversation or what it is that we had to share. I do hope the information we give have aided somebody in rebalancing their being, and to know that sometimes hearing the information once is not enough. Doing it once is not enough. It is a continuous practice to truly reap the benefits.
True. That is the commitment, isn't it? That's the diligence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, true diligence. All right, family. Well, I think we are signing off for the night. Everyone have a wonderful evening.
All right, thank you, everyone. It's you lot that make what we're doing possible. So thank you for your attentiveness.